Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our adult viewers. A special welcome to our young and young adult viewers. Welcome to the program 30 Lessons from the Life of the Last Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Welcome to episode number 14 in the series Persecution and Forced Migration, episode 14, Persecution and Forced Migration. Brothers and sisters, as we mentioned yesterday, in order to halt the spread of Islam, the idolaters of Mecca first tried diplomacy. When they failed, they employed slightly more aggressive tactics. One of those tactics was character assassination. Basically, they called the Prophet names that would make people less likely to listen to him or want to be associated with him. So, for example, they called the Prophet a soothsayer, they called him a lunatic, they called him a man possessed, they called him a sorcerer, a person who can, make magic and bewitch you and cause you to think things that are not true or believe things that are not true, etc. Another tactic they employed was taunting or heckling. And basically what that means is that wherever the Prophet would go, there would be a crowd of people or a group of the pagans who would follow the Prophet and shout at the top of their lungs, "Don't listen to him, don't listen to him, he's a liar, he's an apostate, he's a troublemaker." And even if the Prophet ﷺ was able to find his way in Mecca unbeknownst to them and would find a person and begin talking to him, they would find him, the Prophet. They would seek him out, find him talking to that person and begin again heckling and taunting him. And obviously that awkward situation would make people not want to be around the Prophet, and therefore they would be unable to listen to what the Prophet, or discouraged from listening to what the Prophet had to say. Another slightly aggressive tactic they used, misrepresentation. And this is where they would distort the Prophet's words and offer the most misleading interpretation of his teachings to create doubts and to deter people from listening to him. One example of this is that the Prophet, one of the things he taught his followers was حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةِ, that the flesh of dead animals is prohibited for consumption. And this was something which was very common amongst the pagans. If they found a dead animal in the road, they would eat it. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited this practice for his followers and told them not to eat the flesh of dead animals. And so the pagans, again, seized on this as an opportunity to make the religion of the Prophet seem foolish, seem nonsensical. How did they do that? They would ask, for example, as if they were curious, but they weren't curious. They were trying to what? To, again, make the Prophet's religion seem foolish. They would say, "Who killed the animal that died in the road? Who caused its death?" And obviously everyone would answer, Allah. It was Allah's will that the animal would die. And then they would say, "And who killed the animal that you eat?" And the people would obviously say, "We killed it. We took its life." So then the pagans would say, "So you mean to tell me that the animal that Allah kills the animal that you kill is better than the animal that Allah kills?" And then they would laugh. And they would and in this way they would make it seem as if what the Prophet was teaching was foolish. It doesn't make sense. Certainly the animal killed by Allah is better than the animal killed by a person, by a human being or creation of Allah, etc. So they had these three primary tactics they used to try to deter people, slightly aggressive tactics to deter people from entering the faith: character assassination, taunting, heckling, and misrepresentation of the facts. But despite all of these efforts by the pagans, people continue to embrace Islam and abandon the religion of the idolaters. When the pagans found that they were unable to prevent the spread of Islam through peaceful or slightly aggressive means, they chose to employ violence as a strategy and resorted to persecutions. The torturing of the converts to Islam and inhumane acts of cruelty against them started late in the 4th year of prophethood. The transgressions began slowly and were isolated at first, but steadily increased, intensified, and became more and more common, until by the middle of the 5th year, the situation was unbearable. And the Prophet's followers began to beg for relief and look hopefully to the heavens for a sign that Allah had seen their pitiful plight, heard their desperate pleas, and would soon grant them relief from oppression. In the month of Rajab of the 5th year of prophethood, relief came. Allah revealed verses encouraging the believers who were unable to practice their religion in their own land to migrate and seek asylum in a land where they could. Allah revealed the verses, or the following verse from Surah Al-Zumar, the 39th Surah, verse number 10. He said, لِلَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً لِلَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا هَذِهِ الدُّنْيَا وَأَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةٌ إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Good is the reward for those who do good in this world. And Allah's earth is indeed spacious. So if you cannot worship in a place, then go to a are patient rewards in full without reckoning. The words of Allah, وَأَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةٌ, the earth of Allah is indeed spacious, were a clear indication, a clear permission from Allah for the believers to migrate, to leave Mecca in search of a place where they could persecution. All in, and they migrated. With the permission of Allah, of the Prophet ﷺ, they migrated. All in all, the Muslims made 3 total migrations. 2 to Abyssinia, and a final one to the first home of the Islamic State, Al-Madinah. What lessons, brothers and sisters, can we learn from what we have heard today? Number 1, unfortunately, as sad as it is, there are people in the world who are filled with hatred for truth and the people of truth. Number 2, that hatred, if not checked, if there are no laws, or if the laws that exist are not enforced, that hatred will drive those people, those hateful people, to commit acts of violence against believers for no other reason than that they believe in Allah and Islam. And we see this today in places like China, India, Burma, etc. And that teaches us, brothers and sisters, that this hatred and acting on it violently was not limited to the Prophet's time, but is something which exists in every time and every place. There will be these hateful people, and some of them will be so driven by hate that they'll commit acts of violence against the believers for no other reason than that they believe in Allah and Islam. Number 3, the aim of their violent attacks and persecution, and yes, brothers and sisters, it's not just reckless abandon. It's not just violence without a purpose. They do have an objective by being violent. Number 1, to turn believers away from their faith, to get you and me, because of the fear of violence, to what? To give up being Muslim. Or to discourage those who want to accept Islam from accepting it. I don't want to be a part of a religion where people get what? Persecuted? So these are the goals of those people who resort to violence. Number 4 from the lessons. Islam is a religion of following and not one of innovating. We don't make things up as we go. We don't do whatever feels good or makes sense at the time. How do we see this in the part of the seerah that we listen to today? Well, brothers and sisters, these people, the Prophet's companions, were being persecuted. And rather than respond to the persecution with what was dictated by their instincts, all of us have instincts. All of us, when we are being attacked, we have a natural instinctive response to that. But because the persecutions were related to their religion, it was religious persecution, they needed a religious response. And they waited for that response. They subjected themselves to persecution as they waited for Allah to provide a solution for their problem and to grant them permission to migrate. This shows that they understood that in religious issues, the response has to be a religious one. And the religion is dictated and provided by Allah, not by what? Our desires. Number 5 from the lessons. Al-Hijrah, migration, is a part of our religion. And what does Al-Hijrah mean, Islam? It means leaving the land where the worship of Allah is inhibited or prohibited for the land where we can worship Allah freely. And what that teaches us too, brothers and sisters, is like another lesson packed into this lesson. And that is that religion must be upheld regardless. That we are not at liberty to abandon our faith because there's difficulty in practicing it. We are not allowed, I'm not going to be Muslim, I'm going to give up being Muslim because what? Because there's difficulty, there's hardship associated with being a Muslim. If that were the case, for those of us who are not being persecuted, but we do fall if Islam, because of those struggles, it would have been more allowed for those who are being persecuted simply because they believe. So we have to uphold our religion, even though there may be difficulty or hardship associated with doing so. Number 6 from the lessons, Muslims do not worship a land. Rather, we worship the Lord of the land. If tyrants in a land that we love prevent us from worshiping Allah, we leave the land we love in order to worship the God that we love more than anything else. And this is important too, because there's some people, some Muslims in this world, who are being oppressed because they live in a particular land. And because they want to live there, they love that land, they remain there and subject themselves to persecution. Allah doesn't want us to do that. If there are tyrants who prevent us from worshiping Allah in a land, we leave that land so we can worship Allah because we love Allah more than we love the land. And last but not least from the lessons, just because the present is dark doesn't mean that the future won't be bright. Allah teaches in the Quran, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The pious people will triumph in the end. And there's going to be difficulty, there's going to be hardship, because that hardship is how Allah distinguishes between those who are truly committed to their faith and those who their commitment is what? It's suspect or it's non-existent. And so there's going to be hardship, but we have to know that the end is going to be for what? For the people of truth. This is Allah's world, and Allah is going to give victory to His people. And with that, we conclude the lessons. But before concluding the actual lesson, I remind you all of the question of the week and encourage you to submit your answers if you have not already done so. The question of the week for this week, and remember, there's a cash prize to be available for the winning contestant for this week. So please submit your answers and make yourself eligible for that cash prize. The question of the week, as we said, after the first words of revelation were revealed to the Prophet, the revelation was suspended for a few days. What were 2 possible reasons given for this? What were the 2 possible reasons given for the suspension of Al-Wahi? Again, after the first words of revelation were revealed to the Prophet, the revelation was suspended for a few days. What were the 2 possible reasons given for this? And with that, we will close and conclude. Until tomorrow, when we see you again, inshallah ta'ala, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us life to meet again tomorrow. Until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your houses, bless your spouses, bless your fasting, and reward you immensely for your prayers, your fasting, your supplications, your dhikr in this blessed month. Give you an immense reward and make us all from utaqa'i Ramadan, from those who their necks will be freed from hellfire in this month by His mercy. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who listen to the talk and follow the best of it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who He teaches beneficial knowledge and who He benefits with that knowledge by making us from those who practice what He has taught us. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.